Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. This episode is part of our mini-series featuring the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics, otherwise known as ACEND. We are creating this series to clear up common confusion and misconceptions about ACEND and its relation to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, as well as the Commission on Dietetic Registration. We're also in a super transformative phase of dietetics with a new master's degree requirement, dietetics application process, and ACEND also created some new advanced practice doctoral standards where understanding these topics are crucial for pushing our profession forward. Join our conversation with Dr. Rayane AbuSabha. She's the Executive Director of ACEND, and in this series, we're going to discuss what ACEND is, their new standards, and what steps you can take to uplift and advocate for our profession with these standards. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your host, Jenna, and similar to the series that we've been having with Dr. AbuSabha with ACEND, we are super excited to feature even more experts when it comes to understanding all aspects of becoming a dietitian, when it comes with accreditation, choosing the right programs, and really trying to help clear some of the cobwebs of understanding all the proper steps to becoming a dietitian. And so I'm really thankful today to continue this conversation about ACEND, about the proper application requirements, particularly with the changes in DICAS, with none other than Miss Lauren Bozich. She's the Senior Director of Accreditation at ACEND, and Dr. AbuSabha was great with connecting me with her because she's really deep in the weeds as to understanding all aspects of this new application process. And so if you have any questions about like what it looks like going in and applying for these programs with this new application process, we're super happy to have Miss Bozich here to share it with us. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And so our first question, just to kind of do a broad overview, kind of letting people know who you are. I've given, that overview, how you're the Senior Director of Accreditation with ACEND, but, more maybe into your background as to what type of dietitian you are, leading you to your role, and then doing, after that background of yourself, background of ACEND, and kind of merging it together.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So yes, I am Lauren. I have been a dietitian for, close to 20 years now. I started with work in the hospital. So I did inpatient and outpatient dietetics. I moved on to some more strictly outpatient work, and then worked with corporate wellness. And then I've actually been with Ascend for 13 years, which I can't believe it. And then been in my current role as the Senior Director of Accreditation for the past 3 years. Before that, I was a senior manager with Ascend, working very closely with our programs. And so with my current role as the Senior Director of Accreditation, I'm overseeing all of our accreditation processes and procedures within Ascend, ensuring that our work with our programs and our students is all streamlined. And it's been a very rewarding transition to this role. And most importantly, I get to work with the folks over at DICAS and with the new application process and kind of seeing that from start to where it is today. So it's been a great experience.
Great. And given your background of being with Ascend for 13 years, for those who may be coming in just hopping on this episode, we do have other episodes that do a broad overview of like what is Ascend if people want a deeper dive. But given the role that you have within Ascend and what you've seen with your work, whether it's like, a one sentence explanation or just a brief overview for those who may be like, what even is Ascend? Like
Sure.
to get a good foundational understanding before we dive into DICAS.
Yeah. So ACEND is the acronym for the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics. And because that's a mouthful, we always just say ACEND. But we oversee all of the dietetics programs, ensuring that they are following our standards so that they provide a quality education so that graduates of ACEND accredited programs can go on to become registered dietitians, nutrition and dietetic technicians registered. We accredit over 600 programs. And so we are kind of that stop of all of the education that you may need before you become a dietitian. And then once you go to take that exam, you're kind of under the umbrella of, the Commission on Dietetic Registration, or CDR, and then the Academy when you become Academy members. So we handle all of the education piece of that process.
Awesome. Yeah, and I really appreciate you giving that distinction because something that Dr. Abusaba also mentioned is how you are a complete separate entity from the Academy, just as the Academy is a
Sure.
complete separate entity from CDR. And so we always like to explain that distinction before diving in. So I
Yep.
appreciate it.
And I think that's a good way to kind of do that distinction. It's like, okay, once you finish your education and you're ready to take the exam, you're kind of out of our umbrella. Granted, we do still talk with students as they move forward in the process, but then kind of guide them towards how do they take the exam, or, once you pass the exam, how do you, find employment and things like that.
No, awesome. So now diving more into the new application process for if someone wants to apply to one of these accredited programs, like with what you mentioned, what Ascend, the role that Ascend plays. And so you provided a great overview of what Ascend is, what your role is, kind of where your expertise is. But now can you provide a general overview of what DICAS looks like and what DICAS is?
Sure. So DICAS is a centralized application service. It is specific to dietetics programs, which is where the name comes from. So it's dietetics inclusive centralized application service, so DICAS, where you'll hear of other CASs, so other centralized applications, so GradCAS. If you're applying to, public health, it might be SOFAS, something like that. So there are plenty of other CAS systems, and then ours, dietetic students would apply to DICAS, which is run through Liaison. But essentially, it started many, many years ago with applicants applying to dietetic internships. And then about 3 years ago, it was revised and we kind of went to a new, more enhanced platform, and we opened it up to start thinking about how we can incorporate all supervised practice programs. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for anyone looking to apply to dietetics programs, which is why, it's now dietetics inclusive centralized application service, because all supervised practice programs will have an application in the software for students to apply to. And when I say supervised practice programs, I'm talking specifically about dietetic internships, our coordinated programs, and our graduate programs.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm glad that you gave that distinction too, because, like, for example, part of the education process is possibly getting the DPD certificate, and that's completed in your undergrad. But when it comes to what you use DICAS for, you don't use that to apply for those, like, bachelor's programs or things like that.
Correct. Yep.
Mhm. Awesome.
Yep. So it'll be that kind of next step.
Great. And when it comes to looking at the components of DICAS, you mentioned kind of wanting it to be that one-stop shop for all of these supervised practice programs. So what components of the application will all programs have? And then distinguishing between what may be supplemental depending on the program, because I think that is a part that some students may want clarity on of what will I for sure need for every program, but then maybe what direction or where do I need to look if a program may need something else.
Yeah, great question. So what's great about the DICAST platform and application is that it allows applicants to fill out a bulk application just once, and then they can have some supplemental information that's specific to each program that they may want to apply to. And so it kind of takes that step of repeating work and repeating uploading of transcripts and things like that that you may have had to do in previous, or if you were applying directly to a program, you would have to do that. So the bulk part of the application is, we call them quadrants, so Q1 through 3, and then the program specific would be quadrant 4, Q4. So within those first 3 quadrants, so everybody that fills out a DICAS application has to do these first 3 quadrants. And that is quadrant one is personal information. So that's when you would answer if you have a DPD verification statement or you're working towards getting one. It would be your contact information, different things, just general personal information. Q2 is where you're going to put in your academic history. So all of your colleges attended, you're going to do coursework entry. That's when you upload any transcripts or request transcripts to be added to your application. Q3 or quadrant three is all about your like supporting documentation. So if the applicant is in any organizations, they have any certificates that they've achieved or accomplished, any awards that they may have, and then in that section, if they are a DPD student or graduate, is where they'll upload or request their verification statement from their DPD director and things like that. So any of those supporting kind of documents that maybe any program that you apply to would need to have. And then programs that are participating in DICAS will go in and they will develop their own Q4, which is the program specific section. And so that's really where the programs can advertise their program. They're going to put what their program's about. And then they can ask for letters of recommendation in this section. Personal statements would be asked for in this section. And then program specific questions. So they may ask, you know, is the applicant wanting to apply to our, on-site program, or does the applicant want to go and they have a list of some sites and they get to pick sites that they may want to go to. So anything that would be helpful for the program to know, they're going to ask that in that Q4 section, that program specific section. And then you may find that there's programs that don't want letters of reference or don't want a personal statement. They just want to ask questions. So it really is going to be program specific in that section to where it may be a bunch of extra things. It may not be a lot of extra things. But those, letters of reference, that personal statement, and then any other, program specific questions would come in that Q4.
Awesome. And one kind of follow-up question regarding the letters of recommendation. Given that that'll be in the Q4 that is program specific, are they able to use the same letters of reference for across different programs? Like if they have the same like two or three people, they would just put the same contact in all the different Q4s.
Correct. Yep, exactly. And so, yes, they can definitely do that from an applicant side. And then what's really great is oftentimes your undergrad, program director or your DPD program director is the one that gets those requests, and they can write a reference or a letter of recommendation, and then they would attach it to any of the applications that you've identified, the applicant has identified. So it makes it really streamlined for the applicant, but then also that program director or the reference writer, I should say, for that section.
Wonderful. And then for that personal statement, because I know that that's a point of where in the past we've heard from a lot of students that being like a stressor of, oh, like what do I write? How do I formulate it? Because also that will be in the Q4. I'm not sure what you've seen on the program side of things, how different the personal statement is from program to program. So would you recommend the
Yeah.
student just write an individual personal statement for each one, have a skeleton one? Do you have any advice on that side of things?
Yeah, great question. So in the past, it used to be kind of just the same personal statement, and a student would upload it, and it would be maybe a more generic one. So you're correct in that. Now that it's in the Q4, um, they can what I've seen is some programs won't ask for one because they ask really detailed questions, and then you have to respond to each question. So it's a pointed, here's my question, write a 500 word response or 1,000 word response, whatever the maximum would maybe be. But I'm finding too that programs are being really specific on their personal statement now. So even if they request a personal statement, it's in my personal statement, answer these 5 questions, or tell us why you want to come to my program. And so while I think it's beneficial because the program's getting kind of some answers to questions they really want, you can, as an applicant, you can think about what you might want to do to show how, your work has been outstanding, or you've done something special that would help benefit your application for this program. But do know that some of those questions may be specific, so not to spend a lot of time on pre-drafting anything until you look at what those specific questions or prompts may be. I'm finding less of a general, just upload a personal statement and leave it up to the applicant to decide. Programs are being really specific in their questions. And I think also they're being more specific because they don't want these general statements. They really want to find out who is this applicant and, what are they going to bring to this program if we accept them in, which I think is a benefit for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that balance of you're saving time on the applicant side of things for a lot of the materials being streamlined so that you can save more of that time for answering those Q4 questions, being more intentional with the programs that you're looking at. And that probably helps students to also sift through and really invest the time in applying for programs that they're genuinely interested in.
Yeah, and you might be going to ask me this in a minute, but I think y- anytime now, so the application is open. It opened on August 5th. So going in and playing in the system and getting a look at what's in there. Applicants can start that Q1 through 3 and Q4 if they see a program they want to apply to, really at any time during this cycle. And so, get started by looking at that and then searching through some of those programs of interest and saying, okay, what are they going to ask me so that the applicant can really take the time to look at those questions and start formulating responses instead of waiting until kind of the last minute to look and see what the requirements are.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point too of now segueing into, yeah, like what the diecast timeline looks like. I think this is a great opportunity now to, like, you gave a really great overview of what all components of diecast is there. But now as far as this current cycle, like the 2025, 2026, if I'm not mistaken, were in previous years, it was optional for supervised programs to participate, and now it's required.
Yes, correct. So starting for the 25-26 cycle, which runs from August 5th until July 31st of 2026. So any program you might be applying to within that time frame would be under this current cycle, which is now live and open for applicants. Um, there are plenty of programs that have open applications now, but I would just say that programs can open their application at any point during this cycle. So I know that sometimes we get questions of, oh, I really wanted to apply this program, but I don't see their application. Well, it could be that it's opening October 1st or October 15th. So there is a filter in the diecast platform that says, you'll see the current programs, but then you can also filter for future programs. So a program may have an application in the system, but for whatever reason, they're going to open, at a later date. And you can still look and see, okay, well, that program's going to come up soon. I'll keep an eye on it. And so I always encourage applicants to, if you look through and you say, oh, I really thought that this program I wanted to apply to, but I don't see them, make sure you kind of either check back often because new programs are going to be opening, all throughout this cycle, and also check that, future programs tab, and then you can see what is, going to be open throughout that timeline. Because, I think some of the internships also are used to opening later, not right at August 5th. They might open their application in, October 15th, or even, November 1st. So again, there's, all supervised practice programs are going to be required to use DICAS. And so there'll be plenty of program options for applicants. So just kind of keep checking to see when more are coming through. The other great thing about the DICAS platform is that you can see when that deadline date is for their applications right on the add program page. So there's a variety of filters you can use to search for programs of interest, which I can go through those filters in a minute. But one of the key things that's right on the front of your screen that you'll see is deadline date. And that's going to be when that application closes for the program. And so sometimes that's, a filter or feature that I want everyone to look at so that they know, okay, I went in the system, ooh, this application's closing, mid-October. I have to get going on it and start completing it so that I don't miss that deadline. So that's really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you being very in depth about the difference between like the date of the cycle, but then how individualized it can be depending on the program.
Correct. Yeah. And I know that that is could be a bit of confusion just because that is a change, not having applications all close on a specific date at a specific time. But I think ultimately that's, really beneficial for the applicant. One, because they might be able to get their application in earlier, or they might be able to get more time to complete an application. But it is just one thing that you really just want to look at so that you don't miss an application deadline.
Absolutely. And one thing too to talk about regarding deadlines is that while you have the cycle and while deadlines for submitting applications may be different depending on the program, you do have two separate like notification and decision dates. And so can you talk a little bit more about what those mean separate from the application deadline?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you are exactly right. So within the cycle, there is grouping of dates for fall and then a grouping of dates for spring. And so those dates in the fall would be November 1st and November 15th. And November 1st is the deadline that programs need to notify their applicants who apply to their program if they are accepted, denied acceptance or waitlisted. So if an applicant submits an application anytime between now and, you know, technically November 1st, they need to be notified by November 1st what decision is by the program. And then by November 15th, that applicant has to make a decision. And so programs cannot require a decision from the applicant prior to November 15th in the fall. That does not mean an applicant can't give their acceptance or denial to the program if they know ahead of time. And so again, if it's, your first choice program and you get an acceptance email on November 1st and you really want that program, you can accept it at any time, but the program can't mandate a decision before November 15th. So then in the spring, that same system applies just with spring dates. So any application that's submitted, technically before March 1st, the program needs to give their notification to those applicants by March 1st of either accepted, declined, waitlisted, and then applicants have until March 15th to give their decision to the program, whether they're going to accept that appointment or decline it.
Awesome. And when it comes to looking at the individualized programs in DICAS, will they have that distinction of we're following the fall timeline or we're following the spring?
So not in a filter per se, but they will have it, they should be having it on their branding page. So in that, what we talked about with the Q4, once you like click to see more information about the program, a branding page comes up. And so we give programs, some guidance and some instruction on what they should put in there, a brief snippet about the program. And then what would be ideal is then putting in, okay, here's the dates we're following. We'll notify you by X date. And so typically if, an application is due in August, September, October. Most likely they're following those fall November 1st, November 15th dates. Again, not always, but most often. But that should be indicated on the branding page. And if at any point an applicant doesn't see it or is confused, reach out to the program, and ask so that they're aware of that. And I've heard a lot of programs in their letters of acceptance, they're putting those dates in there as well. So they're saying, okay, we've notified you of an acceptance. You have until November 15th, as we're following the fall decision dates. And so it's really clear to the applicant that way. But with any questions, throughout the application process. Obviously, DICAS is a great resource, but it may not give you the full picture. It may not answer all your questions. So that program's website and then the program's contact, mainly the program director, you can always go and ask them questions.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're doing that balance of the using DICAS, and it's great because it's centralized, but then also tailoring to the fact there is that pro of it being individualized based off of the program, but also tailoring and using the websites themselves as well for each individual program to help you for sure know. Because, for example, if DICAS doesn't have something, the program site most certainly probably does.
Yep.
And it also helps with doing research about the program as well. Um,
Yeah, and one of the benefits that I didn't mention about DICAS is that it really is student centered, and that has been the goal of moving it to this new platform. Our task force that has really looked at all of the features of DICAS, and so with that, it kind of puts more ownership on the applicant to say, okay, you have all of these options. Now it's up to you to decide who you want to apply to and who you want to submit that application to. But then it also comes with you have to do your research, like you said, and make sure that you know everything because it's not going to just be handed over to you and say, you know, here's everything that you need to know about this process. The applicant has to do a little bit of research based on what their needs are.
Absolutely. And one final question regarding the different like fall, spring deadline decision dates. When it comes to whether or not a program participates in one or the other, is it typically meaning, for example, if they get their decision deadline and it's the November 1st, does that typically mean that that program would start the following fall or would start in the spring, or is that still also contingent on the program?
Yep, it's all going to be contingent on the program. Um, you know, because this process is fairly new, I think we're still kind of seeing programs trying out a variety of things. So maybe in the next couple of years, it'll be more, I don't want to say regimented, but more streamlined in what, if you're fall, you're going to start, maybe that spring or that winter. But no, we have some programs that will have will follow the fall dates and will enroll for the following fall.
Mhm.
We have some that will use the fall dates and enroll maybe starting January, so just a couple months after. But what's great is one, you can find all that information out on the program's website, but in that DICAS application, it'll say the start term.
Mm.
So you should be able to see, okay, this is starting winter of 26 or fall of 26, and that should give applicants an idea of when they might be starting. And that is actually one of the filters too. So applicants can search for that.
That's awesome. And when it comes to, because I think you've given a lot of good like pointers and directions as far as, yeah, you can use these filters on the application site. You can, reach out to the program director directly if there's any program specific questions that they have. But are there other resources on the Ascend website that students can be referred to for additional help and guidance when it comes to navigating things?
Yeah, definitely. So we have an entire student page on our Ascend website. So if you haven't taken a look at it, I encourage all students to take a look. There's a variety of information, but there is one section on the application process. So we have applicant handouts. We have what we call traffic rules, which are really just showing the applicant, if you're following these dates, when you should hear back from programs and when you have until you're notified, or you have to notify the program. And so we have a plethora of handouts and guides and FAQs. We also have some like kind of communication examples. So if students don't really know how to decline an offer, we have some of that wording for them, which we found it to be really helpful. And then there is a group of educators and preceptors that put together a PowerPoint presentation for both programs to use. So program directors to explain the process to their students and applicants, but also for applicants to use. And so that's a really good resource because it goes through and it shows screenshots of kind of essentially what I walked through with all the different quadrants, what they fill out where, reminders to check deadlines and things like that. So the Ascend website is extremely helpful. I will also say that the help center within DICAS is also really helpful. So as applicants are moving through the application, there's always a help button. There's a help center, and then there's both a phone number and an email address for DICAS, and they can call and ask them any questions as well if something's not working right or they're not sure where to put something in an application. The DICAS folks can help applicants as they move through the process.
Awesome. And I'm really glad that you pointed to resources of not just like the logistical technical stuff, but also the if you receive an offer and you don't know how to decline it, or if you don't know the proper wording. I think that's something that's not really thought of, but is really important.
Yeah, and I think, the committee that we worked with and, educators in general have just been really helpful to Ascend in determining what those resources they may need, their students may need. But I think the great thing is that with this new platform and opening it up to all supervised practice programs, not every applicant's going to have that support of a DPD director. They may be coming not fresh out of the field or out of education. They might have taken a break and now they're applying. And so to have resources available um, for those types of applicants was extremely important to us. And from an Ascend standpoint, anytime there's a resource that people can think of or an applicant might come to us and say, this would be really great if we had this, we're open to that feedback and we would love to get that feedback because we sometimes don't know what applicants need. And if we can't develop it, we'll ask, a different group or a task force or a committee to help us develop it as well. But we try to provide as many resources as we can.
Absolutely. And I think that also tailors nicely to with what you mentioned, where how not everyone's coming straight from a DPD program. RD2BE, what we found is a lot of our audience are second career or they're shifting and kind of transitioning from, they might have been out working 5, 10 years and now finally come, not finally, but, now coming back and becoming a registered dietitian. And so I think it's great how, yeah, you're trying to tailor to as many different people coming with different backgrounds and making sure that they have everything that they need to
Mhm.
have the process as streamlined as possible.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, which is really, really great. And also when it comes to, because you pointed to a lot of great resources, like with what I've just mentioned, as far as tailoring to as many people as possible. And now maybe trying to find like actual pieces of advice or steps for students who may be a bit overwhelmed by the like openness of the cycle where it, starts August 5th, ends July 31st, but then there's a different fall, spring, but then the different programs may have different open dates, different deadlines. And so, do you have any advice for students about navigating these dates and kind of going through these deadlines to make sure that they don't maybe like miss something or overlook something?
Yeah, I think my biggest advice would be to kind of start early. You don't have to go into the platform and say, I'm going to sit down and in this hour, I'm going to crank out all of my applications and be ready to apply. But just to know that this system is there to help and the filters are great to kind of open up some opportunities that some applicants may not know about, different program types they may not know, or, if they are willing to move, some great opportunities that are in different states. You can filter by states. You can filter by degree level, depending on what degree type the applicant may want. And so my first suggestion would be to just get onto the platform just to kind of like play around in it. Set up your account and just go in there knowing like, okay, I'm just going to look, I'm going to see what's out there, I'm going to see what the requirements may be. And yeah, maybe it's really easy to do your personal information section. And then the next time you log in, and you might then do your academic history. And I would say academic history is a bulk, it's a heavy section. So, taking that, maybe a few chunks at a time to do it. But just knowing that the system should help streamline the process, but start early. Don't go in there, go in there with an open mind. Know that there might be options that you or programs that you may not have heard about, or know that they existed. And so look at them, research them, maybe keep a little chart of, what programs you're interested in and what their deadline dates are, because they do vary. And just kind of take the time to go through the application, because it is important, but it's also a great opportunity to show off, who you are and your education that you've done, and completed, and, really apply for like the next step of becoming a dietitian, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you note that too, because I mean, imposter syndrome is so common. And um, I think what also makes DICAS or just, applying for this next step so daunting is students have to talk about themselves and they have to talk about their strengths and actually like it appears to them as flaunting, but really it's just you are presenting what you've done and the things that you've done successfully. And I'm really glad that you just like folded that in there where it's like it's exciting and you want to use all the hard work that you've done and apply it towards that next step and keeping that open mind. So I
Yeah,
think all that's good advice.
good.
Awesome. And then let me just make sure. So yeah, then the next thing is going more towards the technical side of things when it comes to like so we talked about navigating the application process, the different aspects of it. And the next thing is maybe comparing the differences with the costs to apply. And so like with any application process, like whether you're applying for university or applying for any educational program, there are costs associated. And so do you mind kind of talking a little bit about like the cost behind it and maybe like what the changes have been, if there were any, or if it's the same?
Yeah. So there have not been recent changes to the cost. I think the cost changed maybe 2 years ago. But to go into DICAS and start an application and start that process, which I said to start early, does not cost anything to the applicant. It's when the applicant wants to then apply to a program. So the first application that is submitted to a program, regardless of which program it is, would be $50. And then every subsequent application to another program is $25 to each one. And so a good thing to note, and this should all be very clear on the each program's branding page, but some programs may also require, a supplemental application to a grad school at the institution or something like that, and maybe another application fee. And so that should really be spelled out, but something to note that there may be some additional costs associated with, the institution or some additional fees that are through there. So just the DICAS application fee is that $50 for the first application, then 25 for each additional one. And I will say, as we kind of transition to all programs using DICAS, we've tried to really talk to our programs and say, how can you really streamline this process for the applicants as well? If DICAS has this great package and it's collecting all of this variety of information for you, what other information is this, for example, a grad school application requiring? Could you put that information in your Q4 within that DICAS application so they don't have to do another application? Or could you just share the DICAS application with your grad school to kind of help with that? And I know for some institutions that's not possible and they have to do that. So again, just look at what the requirements are for those programs and just note that there may be an additional cost from the institution side that you may incur as well as you apply.
And I'm really glad that you shared those nuances and costs and how, again, it's the diecast is great and centralized, but then it's also that balance of the individuality of each program of always just checking with the program website to make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And I'm glad that you made that note that Ascend, advocated to try and get it as streamlined as possible to reduce costs. But if anything, that lets students know that costs are where they need to be, and then trying to limit it as best as possible. And also using that monetary investment of, again, like with what I mentioned before, of truly investing in programs that you are genuinely interested in. Because I think
Yep.
a big, change from before is like you'd get your match. You don't really have choice. That's it. But with
Yep.
it being so much more student-centered, you're actually able to invest in programs where you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe with it being more student-centered, students have more opportunity as far as program acceptances, because then you have that time after programs give their decision for students to pick and choose where they want to
Absolutely.
go. And so I think that money, putting that money down for the application process it's not like it's going nowhere because students have greater opportunities with this new process.
Right, right. And I think what's great about those dates that we talked about earlier is you have that window of, 15, 14 days to make those decisions. So, you should, any program that you apply to, you should get all of those decisions, let's say, for example, November 1st, and then you really sit down and the student can, and the applicant can think of, okay, what's going to be the best program for me that I got accepted to, and then make that informed
Mhm.
decision and not feel rushed that it's 24 hours or, whatever the case may be where you have to quick and make a decision and know that they have that choice.
Absolutely. And one kind of going back to the application cycle, and say that a student like applied 1 year, but then for whatever reason they maybe choose to like not go into the program that year, or they just are thinking, hey, like I am maybe going to sit this year out, but then reapply next year. What does the applicant do if they apply to a program, a previous DICAS cycle, but then they want to reapply in a following year?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of answer that in twofold. So any time throughout the same cycle, applicants can apply to a variety of programs. So I know originally you had asked to, programs can have applications open, throughout the entire cycle. They might follow the fall dates, they might follow the spring dates, or they might do both. So you might have an application that you put in, let's say, early on in the cycle, maybe knowing it's for the spring dates, but they might be due December. But then someone with that same spring, following the same spring dates, might have something due in January or February. So within the same cycle, you can still be applying and using that same application. But let's say in your scenario that I applied in this 25-26 cycle. I, for whatever reason, didn't either get accepted or I decided that I wanted to take a year off and I'm going to reapply in the next cycle. So starting technically August of 26. There are pieces of that application that will continue and carry over from cycle to cycle. But there are some things, definitely the program, anything that you completed in that program specific quadrant, so Q4, would not carry over because, again, you're going to focus on applying to new programs. And so you'll complete that. And then there are sections where you can re-upload additional documents. So let's say you put a CV or resume in for this cycle. Well, you're probably going to continue to gain experiences and want to add to that. So then when you reopen a new application in a future cycle, there is areas to upload a new CV or resume so that those new programs can see that. You can make edits to, let's say, your certificates or memberships of things. Likely, if you were a member of something and it was continuing on through the next cycle, you could go in there and plug that piece in. What's great about the system is when an applicant goes to reapply, so maybe in a future cycle, as soon as you log back into DICAS, you will get an immediate prompt that says, do you want to carry over your previous application or start fresh? So pay close attention if you do that to get that prompt, because if you hit carry over, like I said, all that stuff minus some of the more program specific requirements will carry over. And it'll go through and tell you what you'll need to refill in. Or you can start fresh. Maybe an applicant wants to do that and just wants to say, scratch all of that. I'm starting fresh. I want to do all of this from the get-go. And you can do that as well.
Awesome. I think that was such a great description of just, yeah, like how even more streamlined DICAS is for those people who want to reapply. And again, going back to paying attention to the details, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing, because if anything, it's helping you prep for being detail oriented when you move
Sure.
on to being a registered dietitian, because that's a very important aspect of our career. But I really truly appreciate you taking the time to give such a great, robust overview of the new DICAS process, and also pointing students in the right direction as far as resources, and probably giving them that permission where it's okay to poke around. You're not going to
Yeah.
blow anything up if
Right, exactly.
you like put tabs down or anything. So definitely encouraging them to start early, explore it, doing your research. And I think you even made that note of just writing things down, taking advantage of that 2 week period between the decision dates for the programs giving you their decision and then you giving them their decision.
Yeah.
So I think you really gave a great overview of what students can expect in the future. But any other
Exactly.
last comments or thoughts, Miss Bozich, before?
No, I'm just, ACEND is always here and happy to help. So, take a look at all of the resources on our website. And if anyone listening in or watching this has, suggestions for more ways that we can help, feel free to reach out to ACEND directly, me directly. We're always happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.